sometimes what you'll start to unearth is some of the things that you actually want to work on, but you're maybe not ready to really like share with each other. Welcome to the Weaponized Marriage podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Hewitt.
And I'm Ryan Hewitt.
And today's topic is, Ryan,
setting marriage targets, right?
That's not too happy clappy for you.
Yeah, I mean, I know you like the happy clappy topic, and I like the raw and
not happy clappy
naughty ones. Well, I mean, just the real raw ones. But I mean, this is valuable because think about it. We never set marriage targets or couples targets or what we call balance targets until I started doing Wake Up Warrior in 2018. This was like a foreign concept. Like goal setting to me was something introduced in my life when I was in chiropractic school. And then once I graduated and I think I always wrote down my goals or my targets, if you will, at the beginning, like New Year's or beginning of the year or whatnot, and then just never looked at them again. Right.
I mean, I had a very similar approach until Wake Up Warrior myself.
Yeah. So there's no system to it. So I think what we need to talk about is successful standard operating practices of like how to set targets. If that's something that, you're motivated to do, and also like how to set them.
Yeah.
Like how to set good, I guess, meaningful balance targets. Right. When we say balance, so what I mean by balance is it could be your relationship with one another as a married couple. It could be your relationship with your children. It could be a relationship with your immediate family or in-laws or friends. So any of your like intimate relationships in your life. Obviously, you don't want to overwhelm yourself and set like a whole shit ton of them, but typically the most meaningful ones are your spouse and your children, right? So let's just hit on those today.
Yeah. I think a good way to do it is maybe why don't we talk about like what some of your last quarter's business targets, balance targets were.
Brilliant slip.
Sorry,
business.
Yeah, stop it. That's not a bad thing.
No.
I can't believe you're going to drink a Diet Coke.
It's not a Diet Coke, it's a Coke Zero.
Oh, well, even worse, artificial sweetener.
I know, but you know what? It's literally 100 degrees out. Okay. And it's cold and delicious.
Okay.
And I'm just going to do it.
I'm
going for it. It's my treat today.
So I think that it would be really helpful if we just kind of give people examples and like kind of like let's reflect back on like when we started setting business balance targets. Sorry.
Nice.
Because
that's two.
If I look at like how this is a process that we have both done and has been refined as we've gone along, that I think the framework is really powerful. And I think the best way to introduce it is to like walk them through the framework and then give them examples of like what some of ours were for this last quarter.
Well, I think the framework is in facts, feelings, focus, fruit, or if you will, real, raw, relevant results. So in terms of facts, so you always start out with where you are. Because if you don't know where you are, then there's no way you could know where you're going. And the analogy is if you use Google Maps, Google Maps can't tell you where to go unless it can pinpoint your current destination. So
current reality.
Yeah. Current reality is good. So current reality, in your marriage, for example, could be like, I always like using this example. How many times a week do you have sex? How many? Hold on.
Of course, that's your example.
And how many couples vacations do you take? Like just you, the two of you? How many family vacations do you take?
Yeah.
Those are really easy targets, right?
Yeah, because I think those two are concrete.
Well, they're measurable.
But also I think that it's really important in this balance category to cover the family side of it. Like I always set those two of like, I tend to pick two balance targets for my spouse and
hold on. We're talking about facts. Okay.
All right. But hold on. Well, it's important. And then I tend to pick like one or two for my family side. So I like set it.
Okay. But we're talking about facts. Like where you currently are.
Yes. And how you determine where you currently are in the facts portion of it is you ask two questions. in your marriage, what is working,
Yeah.
and in your marriage, what is not working. And then the
Beautiful.
same goes with your family and specifically your offspring, your children.
Yeah, and
Those are the 3
and the reason
areas.
feelings are detached from that is because if you get into like, well, I feel like we don't spend enough time together, like that's not a fact. That's
Yes.
a feeling, right? So you have to make sure that you are separating your feelings from your facts because they get very wishy-washy and mixed up.
Yes, and what you will find, this is a great thing to talk about, I think, on a couples podcast, is you will find that most females will divert right to the feeling and not be comfortable in stating the facts. And most males, masculine energy, mindset, psychology tends to be able to articulate the facts easier than the actual feelings associated to them. So
That's fair.
I think it's a learned process that you help each other. And for years of doing this at the beginning, you and I set balance targets, but we actually never freaking talked about them with each other.
Well, so I think it is important that you do this as an individual exercise first,
Yes.
but then
Then you share them.
clearly come together as a married couple
Right.
and share them with one another. Otherwise, why would you set a balance target if you're not involving the other person? So,
Well, sometimes we surprise each other
yeah.
like that, like because we weren't sharing them.
Well, listen, if it's a surprise, then you don't share it with them. If you
Yeah.
want to,
No, 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 no.
if you want to have like a
No, I don't mean
surprise
that. Like
birthday,
some things like surprise where which we like could be an example, but like I kind of look at like when I'm looking at the facts, I want to look across the what's working, what's not working, and let's give them some examples of like things that we might come up.
go
Like
for it.
for example, you might say, I'll go off your sex example because I know that's your favorite. Um, it'll be like, what's working in our sex? And it might be like frequency is great. Like we have, sex 2 to 3 times per week. And then what might not be working, it'd be like, hey, I want a little bit more like
Ooh, what?
I don't know, I need, like a little bit more foreplay.
Ooh,
Um,
okay.
like or something like that. And like this is really important what you're saying. The reason I want to share this part where you're doing this exercise about yourself with yourself first because you're not necessarily going to share all of these facts with your spouse
Good.
on that. In facts where like facts is like frequency is 3 times per week. The more you get factual and concrete with the facts, the better you will have to work with when it comes to the other parts of this framework.
Yeah, and then once you've laid down a series of facts in your marriage, then you get into the feelings like, well, how does that make you feel? Like, how do you feel? And you can really parse that out doing the what's working and not working because clearly you're going to have more
Mhm.
negative associated feelings to the things not working and
Yes.
more positive feelings to the things that are working. And the focus piece, so facts, feelings, then the focus part. So how would you explain that part?
Well, feelings, we'll keep the reoccurring theme on the sex all through the
Yeah. Okay.
episode,
Great.
okay?
Great.
So, for example, you might write the same thing of like what's working, and I might write the opposite on what's not working. We're not going to share those facts with each other. We're going to share the targets, right? Because sometimes what you'll start to unearth is some of the things that you actually want to work on, but you're maybe not ready to really like share with each other.
Yeah. So in other words, like focus is relevance, right? So real raw relevant or facts, feelings, focus, right? So you want to share only the relevant detail with your spouse. In
Ye-
other words, like the relevant facts and feelings. You don't want to be sharing things that, might
Right.
cause
So
upset issues
for,
or
and we'll stick with the frequency of sex because I think that one will be good, that like concrete. You might write that our frequency is not working. And I might write that the frequency is working because I think that's for me, it's working for me.
right.
Right. And so that's the fact. And you might write down the frequency is twice a week. And I might write down the frequency in my mind is 3 times a week. But the real where to shift the feelings is how do I feel about that? And that's where I might say, that's more than enough for me. That I feel fine with that. And you might say, "I would like more than that."
Yeah. So my collaboration with you might be on the
Yeah.
frequency or my desire, right? And your desire might be like, I want, something, I want more exciting like situations. So
Yeah.
in other words, like,
I, like, wanna go outside more or something like
yeah,
that.
or I want you to take me away on more just weekend trips, or like more overnights, or more date nights. So date nights is another one that's
Yeah.
an easy target to set, right? So for example, like sex, um, vacations, what was the other one? Did I just say?
Financial goals, I would say, like, as a couple, like,
Yeah.
are really like, "Hey, we wanna
Or
buy a cabin."
experiences, right?
Experiences, yep. So, like I said, let's give them some examples of what, like, some of them would be. But
Okay.
before we get there, we have to, like, go over each part of the
Okay,
framework.
well, the fruit is the last part,
Okay,
right?
so we hold on. The fruit
Yes.
is the
So
next part.
yes. So
The focus
the
is the
fruit
next
is,
part.
well, you talked about the focus. The focus and um
No, we haven't talked about the focus.
I just said the focus would be what you wanted to actually share with your spouse.
Well,
So
I look at more
in
as
other words, it's focus, or AKA relevance.
well, and here's the thing, but what does that mean?
Well,
Because I don't know what that
I'm
means.
saying whatever's relevant to the target that you want to set. So in other words, like, I'm not going to get into let's say sex again. So let's say for me, the facts are we're averaging sex twice a week. How I feel about that is I would love for it to be more like 3 to 4. And let's say some of the ways I feel about that is like, well, I feel like you're, you don't give me an opportunity to connect with you enough at night, and I feel like you ignore me sometimes,
I feel
in
rejected
the
or you
evening,
feel
or I feel
rejected.
yeah. So you're gonna write down a series of feelings of how that makes you feel, but you may choose, in other words, the focus of whatever story you're telling yourself, you might not want to share all of those feelings. You might just choose a certain narrative to
So
share.
this is so interesting because we've obviously both used this framework and we use this across every domain, right? Body, being, balance, and business. And what I think is so interesting is that when I teach focus, like when I'm teaching it with coaching clients, one of the things I teach in focus is to look at the pattern in the facts and the feelings of like, hey, what's the one thing that you think would make the biggest difference? Because you might be talking about, like, for example, like you might list the frequency, you might list that like we haven't gone on a vacation, you might list all of these things as facts. The one feeling that stands out would be like, man, our frequency would go up if we actually made time to go away together.
Sure.
So I look for the pattern of like, what's the biggest one in focus that if I focused on this quarter would move the needle?
Okay, that's better than how I explained it.
Yeah, so that's what I'm
So
saying. I
that's
think it
what I
gives
mean by
clarity.
relevance or focus, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so
but I
that's
didn't
good.
know what you like. I mean, I know
Yeah.
what
So this is
relevant
why
means,
it's
but
really important to write it down,
yeah.
right? Because you can actually visually look at it, like what's working
Mhm.
and what's not working, my feelings about that. And the feelings you could just go off. You could just write a paragraph of
Yeah.
like, here's where I'm at in sex. Like, I feel like we've made a lot of progress, and I feel like Kendra's like noticing me more. She's making more effort to touch me. But it's still, to me, like, I desire her to touch me more. I want her to like look at me more. I want her to validate me, whatever the story is, right? And then you're right. Then what you do is when you set, I guess the final piece would be the fruit, or um,
Yeah.
the result, right?
Um,
In other words, the target, right?
yeah. And then, so when it comes to fruit, I look at the fruit as like the fruit is the result you want. So
Well, it's the
like
target.
it's the target, right? But like I love that they call it fruit, for example, is like whatever seed you plant is going to yield the harvest that you planted based on the seeds you planted, right? But that there's a lot of steps that need to be going in between planting a
Yeah,
seed
but you're not
into
getting
reaping the fruit.
you're not getting into that, because that gets into more granular. What's gotta happen this year for me to hit that target?
Right, but we're gonna talk about that, but I just like to paint that picture of the fruit, like, I almost visualize when I teach this concept of, like, a vine and, like, me pruning like, you're looking at facts and feelings as pruning the vine or planting seeds, right? Like, focus is planting the seed, and then fruit is, like, what is the thing that you ultimately want to have as a result of you pruning and planting? So when it comes to pruning and planting, I look at like, okay, for example, do you want to stick with this sex example? It's like, hey, I would like a couple. The fruit might be, I would like to have a week long couples vacation only where our kids are taken care of, and we go to a sexy beach and we do a photo shoot. Like that might be like the vision. You want to start to paint the picture of the vision and like this is why I think this is such an important concept to talk about, because it's like, how many of you have ever freaking considered doing this for your relationship?
Yeah,
Like,
it's usually like, "Oh, let's take a vacation."
right.
"Oh, well, what do you wanna
In
do?
the
What do you wanna do?"
vacation so concrete. One of the things I want to tap on here too is that, like, this is also, and I'm going to say it from a parenting perspective, because this is where I set those targets first. With Lily, my last quarter, my focus with Lily was less TV in the morning before school, because I wanted our routine out the door to be less stressful and more enjoyable, where I looked forward to it. So the theme of my last quarter was magic in the mundane. And that one of my action items from that was starting to do a lot more stuff at prep at night, so that I wasn't doing all of it in the morning. Sounds really simple. It made a huge friggin' difference. And my goal was to make sure that she was not late for school any day because of my failure to plan and get her out the door. And that was what my focus was. And then my fruit is that she didn't I mean, one of my big things was, like, she didn't miss one day of school, and I had her on time every day this quarter, with the exception of 2 days that were really rough.
Yeah, so your goal was 0 late days.
Yes, and so, but when it comes to balance for, like, this quarter, like, Ryan's birthday's this week, so I wanted to make sure that, like, I did something that he wanted for his birthday, and then I had a plan for it. We also had a couple's vacation where we went to Spain for the wedding. So, like, on that was like, hey, I set some of the targets of, like, things that I want to do, and here's a really good example, actually. So, when we went to Spain, which we had an amazing time, one of the things that stood out on our plane ride back, I wrote this on, started like took note of this for my targets, is that, and it was warranted. Our plane seats on the way there, which was an overnight flight, Ryan fucking bitched constantly about how he's never flying in pigeon class again.
No, I don't care about flying in pigeon class. If I'm sitting there working on my laptop, it doesn't matter. I don't need to drink. I don't want the alcohol. I don't want the free stuff. I don't even eat the meals on the plane. All I want is a comfortable seat. If I'm going to do an overnight, and I swore to God that I would never do another red eye after when I was broke and I went to the CrossFit Games in 2009, I flew a red eye through Cleveland back, and I swore to myself, I'm never fucking doing that ever again. Sure enough, we're flying to Spain in pigeon class overnight, and I'm like, fuck, my arms are falling asleep, my neck hurts, like, and the thing is, like, we only have 4.5 days there, like, and the first day is completely ruined when you're all fucked up from, not sleeping, time change, and you're a mess. I'm like,
Yeah. So the reason I'm saying this is that that would be something that would go on my what wasn't working. And that was like for our balance of like, hey, I have to stop being cheap on flights, like especially if it's a flight that like
well, just on
you
certain
explained,
flights, just on
right? So it's
not
like
everything.
I had said one of my things is that I was
So
going to look
bougie.
into upgrading our
High
seats
maintenance.
on Croatia.
Am I
And
high
then
maintenance?
yes. And then what that allowed us to do was then we had a conversation about it, right? And you agreed, and you actually took ownership and responsibility and upgraded our Croatia flights after I had already booked them. So we worked together, but it was a great conversation because it allowed us to share a mutual relationship goal. And then now, like, I have a lot of where, like I said, we have a full anniversary trip where this is the first time where you and I really work together to book a trip for, and we've been married now 15 years. So, but the reason is that that Croatia trip was on our targets list for the year, right? But then we have worked a little bit on it each quarter since the beginning of the year.
Okay, now you're getting in the weeds and talking about like behaviors and quarterly planning and all that stuff. So we don't have time to get into all of that.
Okay.
So
We don't have to get on that. To simplify it. Sorry. I'm making it,
we're getting really complicated. So
I'm sorry.
I was trying to stay with the framework of like facts.
You're bougie and I'm complicated.
Wow. I mean, you're confusing people. So like, listen, the reality is like you could set all the targets you want and they're complete pie in the sky bullshit if you're not committed to the behaviors that are going to get you there. So that's one thing, one aside. And if you've read the book Atomic Habits, James Clear says the same thing.
Mhm.
He's like, it's not about committing to the target. It's about committing to the behaviors in the granular daily mundane that is going to build you those like little small percentages, whether it's any goal, right? Financial goal, relationship goal, or anything. But we can't really get into all that today. Just today is more like painting the vision, because I think if you know where you are and you know where you want to go, that's the first step. It's like creating that awareness of the vision,
Mhm.
right? So it's knowing where you are, knowing the vision of where you want to get to, and then you can fill in the gaps with the work. So, in other words, we're starting with that framework of like facts, feelings, focus, fruit, which is like start with working and not working, look at that list, find the common themes and allow those common themes help you set those targets. And sometimes, like, the reason balance targets or relationship targets are harder than, say, money goals, like it's like that's a concrete number. It's like
Yeah.
we want to buy this,
Mhm.
we want to save this, we want to make this, we want to invest this. Or even body goals are so fucking easy, right? It's like
Mhm.
I want to be this body fat percentage, I want to be able to lift this amount of weight, I want to be able to like compete in this competition,
Mhm.
whatever it is. So the reason that marriage goals are difficult is because they're a little bit harder to like set concretely, right? So, in other words, like you're saying, it's like, well, I want to have, I want to make sure that Lily has no TV and she eats a breakfast and a protein and like all this stuff. It's like, well, what's the target? 0 late days. Okay,
Yeah.
that's concrete.
Mhm.
What has to happen for that to happen is a whole other set of like
Yes.
rules, laws, and behaviors and all that stuff.
Mhm.
So what I think is would be helpful is like, let's give examples of balanced targets that we have both set for this year. And we're just talking about like yearly targets here, because you
Mhm.
can split, you can set a target for the year. It doesn't have to happen at the end of the year.
Mhm.
Like,
It could happen at any point in the year.
yeah. So I'll share one of the first ones, which you kind of touched on. So my goal was to have 2 family vacations and 2 couples vacations, right?
Mhm.
So we've already done 1 family vacation to Florida,
Mhm.
1 couples vacation to Spain.
Mhm.
So what's left is we have 1 planned to Croatia,
Mhm.
right, as a couples vacation. That's all like planned and paid for. So the last one for me to like really hit that target completely would be to have 1 more family vacation.
Which typically we would have a lake week vacation, but that brings
Yeah.
me to one of my goals, which is our mutual goal, is to buy a cabin on
Yeah.
the lake. And it's been a mutual goal for 15 years since we've been married. And we didn't start taking
How many
seriously
years were serious though? Probably the last 2.
the last 2, right? Which is a problem because that's when everyone got serious about buying a lake in Maine because they could.
Everyone became a lake person who wanted to leave Boston and like all
Yes,
the like
work remote and
urban
blah blah blah.
urban houses.
Yeah.
And guess what?
So
Guess what? Everyone who figured out they didn't want to be a lake person, they just Airbnb'd their place. So
yes, and they kept it as an investment.
yeah,
But anyways, so I think we're close to that. We're getting closer. But part of one of the things that happened over the last reviews of our targets for the last quarters has been the fact that we were really looking for a unicorn. And we've had to specifically the last quarter, one of the things you and I focused on was starting to expand our vision of where that cabin could be, what it could look like, because we were being we had too much stringent criteria based on where we're at, which has given us more opportunity now.
yeah. So I mean, you
Uh,
can always pivot these targets, right, or refine them as the year goes on.
and here's the thing that might happen, like we might buy this cabin tomorrow,
Yeah,
right? Which will mean it will close in Q3, and then we'll get that family vacation at a week at our own cabin, which is really our goal.
yeah. So I'm still hopeful.
Yeah, I am too. So with that said, is like the targets that you're setting as a couple, they might not happen on the exact timeline you want, but the exercise and the value of it is working together towards a common vision
Right.
and having a conversation around that common vision. Because like I said, and I'll give you an example of one that was on our balance targets that I never told you until after the fact, was when, I wrote down for, like, 2 years that I wanted to get the courage to do a plant medicine retreat with you, and now as of this weekend, we're going on our 4th,
Mhm.
or you're going on your 4th.
No, this is my
No.
5th. This is
Yeah,
our
usually this is my
this
4th,
is your 4th.
your 5th.
Yes.
So, and, like, I mean, we talked about it on that on another episode, but that, like, literally, I feel like that has a very that has a whole other meaning, I think, in our lives as a couple, but it's really changed my last year a lot of, like, it's really had an impact on my life. But for 2, maybe plus years, and I talked about this on, like, last episode, I was so resistant to it
Mhm.
until you went,
Mhm.
right? And then I still, even that, I was resistant. I wasn't really happy about
That's
it
a common theme with a lot of things, though.
with me, yeah. But with that said,
I'm the risk taker.
the reason that I, bring that part up that I think is really important is that, like, here it was like a target that was like, I didn't have the courage to admit that I was curious, but, I didn't have enough clarity on, like, what that would mean for me, because my risk threshold in that capacity, is not as high as yours. Like, you're definitely, like I said, you're more apt to take risks that, but then, like, when it comes to, like, financial and business risk, I
I don't know.
am
You
much
say that, but I
more,
don't know.
but somewhat, like, I'm much more apt to try different things and take, like, even, like, if I didn't freaking make you start your business, you would have, like, still been, like, working for Doc.
Okay, yeah, 15 years ago. I
Yes.
think things have changed since then.
And here's the thing, I've got older and my risk threshold has
Yeah,
gotten
mine's gone higher.
lower.
Mine's gotten a lot higher. Yours has gotten a lot
Yep.
lower.
Which is also another, like, very interesting thing to, like, observe when you look at your facts and feelings. It's like, "Hey, man, why has this happened?" And start having that conversation, like, with yourself. It's building awareness around things that, like, "Hey, how have things shifted?" Some for the better,
Well,
some for not
well, I just think
better.
my decision to just get as uncomfortable as I possibly could in all my domains is I think I figured out how to transfer it. I've gone on stage naked in a bodybuilding competition, which
Oh
is
gosh, I was like, "When did you do that?"
no, I wasn't
I
quite. I
missed
was
it.
almost naked, but I mean that was really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And like I working out is my thing, right? Um, even in my body, I'm still trying to get uncomfortable,
Mhm.
right? I mean, in my being, very uncomfortable, like starting to go to church and read the Bible and praying and things like that. Going to like a couples retreat that was Christian based. That was very uncomfortable.
Mhm.
We're doing uncomfortable. Like I've started another business, from scratch. And I think that, in our marriage, I'm always wanting to take more and more risks, right? As far as like not just with, intimacy and things like that, but with experiences and with like therapy, we got really committed to that.
Mhm.
Like that was really uncomfortable at
Mhm.
first,
Yep.
not anymore.
No.
So I think whatever that I think that's just how you grow. You
Yeah.
don't grow in comfort.
But I think where this organically went is really pivotal to, like, understand is that, like, by setting targets individually for us as a couple and for our family, it has allowed us to communicate on our vision more consistently because you and I are very aligned in our core values, and we're very aligned in what we wanted,
Well, I hope if you're married, that's the truth for
but that's not always the case.
you don't have to be aligned in everything, but I think
Yep.
like I said, I think at least 3 out of your 4 top values. 3 out
Okay.
3 out of your
I
5.
I agree. But also what I think is huge in this part of the conversation is that you do have to be chasing down a common a vision that is shared. Because if you are not chasing down a vision that is shared and you're just chasing down the vision that you want for you individually, that's not
Mhm.
the point
Right.
of being in a relationship.
Yeah, and I think that vision has to be exciting, and it has to feel impossible
And it
in
has to
in a
be
way.
revisited and communicated often,
Yeah,
which is why this framework works
and
that well.
pivoted and changed and refined.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think you have to have, goals for yourself and then goals for your family and your marriage for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think that, what was I gonna say about that? I think also, and I'm guilty of this, is if you're so focused on the target and the goal, and you're always just thinking about that and working towards that, sometimes you can miss out on like the actual, like, as the adage says, is like it's not the destination, it's the journey. You have to really focus on enjoying the ride.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It can't just be like, I'm going to work my balls off just for this week vacation with my wife.
Yeah.
Right. I think my advice is set targets that aren't just like event driven.
Mhm.
Also set targets that you have to work at in
Yeah.
order to get there.
And I think it's funny that we use the vacation one as because that's one's very concrete, like,
Yeah,
to
but that
use.
one's really easy, right? It's like, hey, let's
But
set a
here's
target
the
to go on a
thing,
vacation.
it's not easy for a lot of people.
Okay, well, I
And
get that, but
and I'm not talking about, like I'm talking about, like, there are some people that, like, you go on a vacation, you wanna talk about highlighting dysfunctional relationship, that's going on a vacation for some people. We were like
well,
that for
remember
a
there's
long time. We were like that for
what's the
a long
difference
time.
between a trip and a vacation? Well, a trip is where you bring your family, and a vacation is when you're just going
But
solo.
we went this was before kids. We had lots of trips that were very I can think of one very specific one, St. Thomas,
Well, I think this is
where
maybe why couples don't plan vacations too, is
yeah.
they're not ready to have like a week alone,
Well,
detached,
because
like,
they don't well,
or
also
maybe
too
that's what they need more than anything.
well, it puts them in a different scenario sometimes where they actually, like, realize, like, "Holy shit, we don't communicate, we don't have anything in common." It highlights that. So, one of the things that, like, why I think talking about vacations is a good balance goal is that, like, you could say, like, "Hey, if we had a vision," like, I might set a vacation goal and you might set a vacation goal. I might say Montana and you might say, like, Florida,
Yeah,
like
that'll be opposite.
2 different, 2 different types of vacations, right? So, the reason I say this is that, like, this is also, like, thinking about even getting on same page on, like, what is important in a vacation is just another way to show at what level you are communicating on.
Yeah.
And having respect for, like, each other wanting different
Well, I
things.
think you have to have compromise, right?
Yeah.
But here is my whole point in saying all of this is your targets, to a degree, if you want to grow in your marriage, they can't just be like, oh, let's go on a vacation. Oh, let's do this thing we'll pay for. Like, set targets that are going to that make you feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? And like, it could make you feel uncomfortable financially. Like, that's a
Mhm.
way to kind of push you to whatever it is, save, make more money, like plan, but not just financially. Like, maybe it's an uncomfortable vacation for you because it is something your wife really wants, but you don't really want, but
Yeah.
you're going to try to make it really special for them.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Or it's an experience that could really benefit you as a married couple. Like, let's say it's an intimacy retreat or a marriage retreat, or it's like visiting a family member that you put on the back burner,
Mhm.
right, for years,
Which means you're gonna have to confront, like,
but
that.
you really should,
Yeah.
really would like,
Bother you if that person wasn't there.
yeah, exactly. You've been putting the
Mhm.
vacation on a, or whatever, putting the trip or the visit on the back burner for a long time, you know? So,
Mhm.
in other words, my advice is, don't just set these like happy clappy
Arbitrary.
ones, but also set ones that are gonna, stretch
Stretch
you,
you and grow you.
make you uncomfortable.
Yep.
And that's all I got to say about that.
Okay, so what's one of your Q3 balance targets? I know you probably haven't done
Q3,
them
we're
yet.
talking about yearly targets, man.
No, I'm talking about we're going in
We're
it's
I
halftime,
know.
baby.
So we're going into, so you wanna do quarterly goals now?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so like, I have yearly targets, right?
Okay.
So you're
What's
saying
one of your goals for the summer for your family and for us?
buy a cabin.
Okay. Which is mine too.
Okay.
Okay.
Good job.
Awesome. What about for your family? Like what's something that you want to work
Buy a cabin.
no, with Lily.
Oh, with Lily. So, I mean, I really wanted to make sure that I spent some time with, like, go take her camping. Yeah.
You want to take your family?
I know how, like, I've took her camping. That was it last year. Yeah, I took her camping and she still talks about it. And I just went to like a local campground, like 15 minutes from our house, and she still talks about it because she dug it. She was very happy about it. So I think she really wants to do that again. So yeah, it's in my mind that I want to find, like, whether it's like one night or 2 nights or whatnot. I don't know if you'll come. You probably don't want to sleep in a tent, but Maybe it's just me and Lily again. We'll see. But I think take her camping. I think that's something I really want to do with her.
I think for me is that like I just want to encourage her to be outside as much as possible. And like,
Okay, that's not a target.
hold on, I'm not done yet. Like I think about even this week, Ryan took her fishing. And man, that kid was so lit up that like she caught like a fish.
Although she complained that she didn't catch the fish, even though she reeled it in. She didn't cast the hook out there. I'm like, dude, if I let if we're waiting for you to get the bait out there where the fish are, it's like we're not going to catch anything.
But like one of the things I was thinking about, she's at camp this week and I dropped her off and like they have a bunch of goats and chickens there and stuff like that. And this is a place where
Please don't say you're gonna get her a goat.
No. But like I dropped her off and she literally I turned around and she's already in the goat pen. Right? Like she's like, and I just thought, I was like, man, what a freaking gift that
Okay,
is.
what's the target?
So the target is like to get her out, like physically moving in nature as much as possible. Like less, no limiting screen time. That's the target.
No,
Limiting screen time.
It's not. So you're
increasing the outside.
What's the target? Because you could literally do that one day and then you hit your target.
I mean, my target for her, she's learning how to ride a pony.
Okay.
And
so how many lessons?
She's gonna ride once a week.
So you're gonna have her ride once a week in the summer.
Yep.
That's
and
good.
She is already ready to go on her own.
Yeah,
but like
sure.
she by the end of the summer, I just want her to be able to like
Kruger.
I guess I should say I want her to be able to steer is my target for her.
It's a good skill to have on a horse.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's already an expert.
Yeah. So
4 years old.
Yeah. And I was just like, I feel so blessed that I have access to the place that Lily rides at. It's such a gift. That like I just want to take it's funny because sometimes I drive down that driveway and I think about like, oh shit, what am I doing? Like this is gonna be so expensive. Like I know what it costs to have a horse, Well,
yeah, you're
but at the same time, I'm just like, man, I couldn't put a price tag on the fact like this little pony that they have there, like it's a friggin' saint. I'm like, I am so lucky that I am able to go to a place that has a pony like this.
Snickers.
So no, I was Turk's the one she's learning to ride on. So, anyways, it's been really fun for me.
Yeah. So there's 6 months left in the year. So
halftime, baby.
Set some balance targets. Have your spouse listen to this podcast, set some targets, and go after it.
Thank you for listening.
Okay. See you, spiel.
If you liked this episode, please share it with another couple that might benefit from it. And as always, please rate, review, and subscribe. And we look forward to seeing you next time on
the Weaponized
Marriage
podcast. See you guys next week.